So I will call the meeting of the WSESD board to order at 6:03. The meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and to participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. So the first thing that I'm going to do is amend the agenda to postpone until the next meeting, which I believe will be 8/23, the report of recruitment. It's under unfinished business. So I made the motion to amend. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Anne. All those in favor of amending the agenda as noted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So then we will go on to the consent agenda, the clerk's report. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of July 19th, 2022? Thank you, Tim. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deborah. All those in favor of approving the minutes from July 19, 2022, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
I was absent. I watched it on TV.
Okay,
but-
thank you. So then we need to have all those approving the minutes of July 19, 2022, please raise your hand. It looks like there's Sean and Ann, Lana, Deborah, Tim. Can you tell me if
Liz's hand is up.
Liz and
That's the only person I see with a hand up.
all right, and the one abstention was Michelle. Okay. So we will move on to the warrants of July. Is there a motion to approve the warrants of July 18, 2022 in the amount of $259,266.80, July 25th, 2022 in the amount of $448,423.10, and August 1, 2022 in the amount of $130,468.39. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sean. All those in favor of approving the warrants as noted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to payrolls. Do I have a motion to approve the payrolls of July 15, 2022 in the amount of $1,159,781.99 and July 29, 2022 in the amount of $1,018,600.31. Do we have a motion to?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Michelle. So Ann and Michelle, all those in favor of approving the payrolls as noted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. So now we will move on to public comment on non-agenda items. We will spend 10 minutes on that. Sean, would you mind doing a timing? Sure. So anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories. Receive an acknowledgement of the comment with no further action planned. Receive an immediate response by the board chair or administration. Administration would be directed to contact and respond to the person. Clarification sought from the administration for a specified meeting. The topic would be added to a specified future board agenda. The matter would be referred to an executive session. A public hearing would be held on the matter. Do we have anyone here from the public who would like to speak? Then do we have anyone on the web who would like to speak? So I'm going to ask again, do we have anyone from the public, whether online or in person, who would like to speak? Okay, third time call. Anyone in the public comment who would like to speak? Okay, thank you. We will move on then to the unfinished business. Policy and Amendment Committee, board action is needed. Deborah, did you?
Yeah, I move that the WSESD School Board approve for readoption the following policies that were presented at the July 19th board meeting. We are past the 10-day warning period. As a point of reference, each policy is specifically listed in today's agenda. They are A1, the role and adoption of school board policies; B3, board conflict of interest; D3, staffing and job descriptions; D6, substitute teachers; D15, travel reimbursement; F6, education records; F24, firearms and dangerous or deadly weapons; G14, animal dissection.
So Deborah has moved the adoption of those policies. Do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. Could I get the wording on that since there was?
Yeah, I
Could you
move.
email
Yeah,
email it
do you
to
want? Yes,
Please,
of
thank you.
course.
Thank
Yes.
you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you, Deborah.
Mhm.
And Anne was the second. So all those in favor of approving those policies as listed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. So then we will move on to some items that we had on the last two agendas. We may not have presentations for all of them, but the ones we don't, it's just on the agenda. So if there's some comment or something that the board felt they needed to address or bring up. So I'm going to actually turn this over to Mark for the panorama. Thank you.
We can actually present on all of them. Paul, did you want to do an brief overview of Panorama?
I'm totally up to the board. I have had some discussion with board members that they wanted to sort of do a more individual look, and I'm fine with that. I can do both or if there's a lot of agendas tonight, maybe we can defer that and raise questions after the initial presentation. Up to you as well.
Why don't we move to the other presentations, which are a little more in depth, and then we'll take a look at the time. And if we want to dig into Panorama, we can do that.
Great.
So we'll start with Erin's Law update. The board has heard presentations from the high school and has been shared a presentation by the middle school. So Kate Martinez is going to walk us through how the elementary school has typically approached Erin's Law at the start of the school year. And I can report out later how, as an administrative team, we'll be spending some time looking at Act 1, Erin's Law, this summer and rethinking how we deliver that training moving forward. So that's a different topic, though.
I'm just to present from here, or should I probably did share it with you.
Okay.
If you want to just share the presentation is what you already have as board members that I've shared. So I'll just start just for a brief kind of overview for people that are listening that may not know what Erin's Law is, which is named after a childhood sexual assault survivor, Erin Marin. And Vermont was actually one of the first in 2009 to develop and put into action Erin's Law, which requires all public schools in each state to implement prevention-oriented child sexual abuse programs, which teaches students in grades pre-K through 12 age-appropriate techniques to recognize child abuse, sexual abuse, and to how to report to a trusted adult. It also requires that all school staff receive training in that about what it is, what signs and symptoms may look like in someone who has been sexually assaulted, grooming, and other predatory behaviors, what those might look like, and how to respond to a student if they disclose to an adult. And then we also go over mandated reporting, because every staff member is a mandated reporter, and how to do that and what that process looks like. As well as caregivers. That law requires us to teach caregivers the warning signs of sexual abuse, referral and resource information to support them, and any assistance that we can to support their families when they've reported that. So what do we do as elementary schools? This training specifically that you have is what we specifically use, and does need to be probably updated. But it's a general overview for our staff that we go over at the beginning of every year in the first few days. And our counselors are trained in this type of training through the Prevent Child Abuse Vermont. And a lot of our resources are through them as well. So presentation to staff at the beginning of the year. Many of our counselors are trained, as I said, by PCA-VT to deliver the curriculum to students as well as train adults. Really, the Prevent Child Abuse folks are the experts. And at times they have come into schools in years past, which is something we may look into for when we want to provide families with trainings and information as well. I think that's a good way to do that. Counselors give age-appropriate lessons to each grade level using different curriculums. So one of those is a second step curriculum, as well as many others. So I can send you this list separately if you'd like. It's not in this training specifically. The We Care curriculum, which again is from Prevent Child Abuse Vermont, grades 3 to 6. So lessons for each grade focus on healthy relationships. Care for Kids is also from Prevent Child Abuse Vermont, K-2, and it talks about healthy base childhood, healthy sexuality and abuse prevention curriculum. And the focus, knowing the difference between what a public and a private part is. So very age appropriate. And as kids get older, obviously that language changes and the discussions are more in depth. Knowing who the trusted adults are and having a safe body. A lot of this goes along too with our PBIS, our positive behavior interventions and supports that have similar language around safe body and being respectful and things like that. And so a lot of work we do with the curriculum that coincides with PBIS kind of just matches whole as like a social emotional kind of curriculum, right? Having healthy relationships and being kind, and what does that look like? But these specific lessons go more into sexual abuse prevention. Along with, as kids move into 5th and 6th grade, puberty and reproduction, and there is more of a health and safety component to that. I know last year at Green Street specifically, there was a lot of conversation around consent with the upper grades and talking about what that looks like and how to do that, what that looks like. And then a couple other Connections Lab from McGill University is about peer relationships, and then nonviolent communication, which a lot of times for Green Street anyway, is taught through the restorative justice program that our 6th graders do. So the staff training specifically, I know you wanted to kind of know what we do as a school in terms of training staff. So Paul, if you can go to the next slide. Might be an empty one, I'm not sure. So just a little bit about statistics, and those aren't for some reason showing up, maybe because they're in yellow, but 1 in 4 girls is sexual abuse.
They fill in when-
Oh, they will.
I believe so, yeah.
This is my counselor's presentation that she shared with me, so. If you hit it, Paul, will the number show?
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. Now I don't have to read them all. Technology these days, right? So we go over a little bit about the statistics. Which of course, we hear a lot of, which a big point is that the offenders typically are known to the child. Yep. There we go. So just a quick overview. We go over what Act 1 is. It's pretty big. It's comprised of 53 sections. So we kind of narrow it down to what staff really need to know. That's important for them in that moment and as an educator, someone that's with children all day. Go ahead, Paul. And there's lots of resources as well on the, so the TARG at the bottom of this, the TARG, the Technical Assistance Resource Guide, comes from the state. And that's a great resource that we have as well. Thanks, Siri. So that has resources for staff, for parents, all kinds of resources that people can use. And just what the classroom instruction now needs to include. So healthy relationships, communicating with trusted adults, awareness of school resources and community resources as well, and recognizing those sexually offending behaviors. I'm ready, Paul. Yep. So as I spoke of earlier, parents should be included, or caregivers should be included in this prevention. And the Step Up curriculum is one of those curriculums that I spoke of as well that is very useful. And something I think, based on what I've assessed for our own school, is reach out to caregivers and how do we, like Mark said, get them involved in these conversations and these trainings, which is really important. Then we go through for staff, understanding what sexual abuse is. Go ahead, Paul. So there's just a couple definitions of what it is. We talk about it as staff. Okay, I know you're multitasking over there. So the last.
Whoops.
The last slide was about, can you go back to the last slide, Paul? Sorry. It was about physical and non-physical acts. Like, a lot of times people think of sexual assault as physical, but there are also non-physical acts as well, as exposing students to inappropriate media, pornography, inviting inappropriate touch. And then we talk about grooming and what that is and what does it look like for staff. So this was, I mentioned earlier, if a student discloses to a staff member that they've been assaulted, these are kind of just general steps that we take when, somebody reports that to us, because that can be pretty overwhelming and scary and alarming. And so Those are just quick, easy, remain calm, believe the child and reassure them, and then report it to the appropriate folks. And that's when a counselor would be immediately notified of that. And then we, as a team, kind of discuss, all right, what are we doing moving forward? And typically when I say team, it might be a counselor, myself, social worker, that gets involved in that process. And there's that. Any question?
I think that was a great presentation and I wasn't really that familiar with what Erin's Law was. I did a little research. It's very interesting that Erin brought it forward and got it passed by the legislature and the Congress. And then it's not a mandated program that everybody is automatically in. So very interesting that you pointed out that Vermont was one of the early states. And there must be funds available to implement this program from the federal government. And obviously it's a very comprehensive and sensitive program. So I was really happy to learn about it. So thank you very much.
I know our school counselors work, they're just phenomenal in what they do. And they spend a lot of time, not only in, their offices doing lunch bunches and meeting with kids individually, but they spend a lot of time out in the classroom and teaching kids things such as this. It's really important work that they do. And so we're lucky to have them.
So moving forward as administrative team, things that we're going to spend time on starting next week at a retreat that we're engaging in for 3 days is sharing the different approaches of training and workshops that happen across our schools. And what are the differences between an elementary lesson with staff and students and parents compared to a middle school lesson or a high school lesson? And we're going to develop this as a collaborative group, but things we're thinking about are identifying those trainings and start to create a database of what those are for resources. Make a commitment to engage with student leadership groups to ensure diverse voices are heard. Dedicate consistent time at administrative meetings to engage in protocols around identifying what grooming looks like, what it can look like. And to be done as an example, to be brought back to our schools, to be done in staff meetings at our schools. And we would engage in that work alongside counselors, social workers, nurses. BOHS has done work around creating a safe and healthy boundaries that staff at the school has been developing. We're going to take a closer look at that as a full admin team. Where we're doing proactive work to recognize unhealthy behaviors of students and staff. And then explore appropriate outreach opportunities with families. I think that's what something we really need to focus on. How are we communicating and sharing the work that we're doing in our schools with our families, and how can we create more opportunities to engage with our families? And the idea is, as we go through with this work throughout a school year, we create a document where we're sharing all of our work collectively throughout the year. So as we grow as a team, we're creating a database of material, of lessons, of outreach that can be done. And that becomes something we can fine tune year after year. So it's a similar approach to what we took with ESD development last year. And that's the work we'll engage in more collaboratively than frankly we have in the past, starting next week at a retreat. Because it's very much been each school kind of does their thing. They may use the same materials, but I don't think we've had school to school leadership team thorough collaborative conversations about that work. So we're committed to doing that and increasing our ability to be aware and to respond appropriately.
Yep, and I think one of them is Liz. So Liz,
I just want to clarify with Kate that any reports that you get are passed to the state.
Yes, that's part of the mandated reporting.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, particularly for the public. Thank you.
thank you, Liz. It looks like Mindy has her hand up. So oh,
Mark, so currently all the elementary schools, they are using the same material though. So the programs are more or less on the same level playing field. And before you collaborate them to sort of create one consistent approach, am I hearing that correct?
Yes. Yep. But in the way we undertake the way we conduct the work may be different from school to school. And what we want to move away from is a one and done approach and move towards a approach where we're coming at it many times throughout a school year in smaller doses.
Do you think that different demographics represented in each of our schools have different needs that would, need more variation, or is it still pretty consistent because it's sort of a solid foundation of the same information?
I think any lesson you teach, regardless of topic, we have to be aware of differentiation and meeting the different needs of learners. So that would certainly be part of resources that we develop and strategies and approaches that we identify. I know Julianne.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we're really lucky to collaborate with Prevent Child Abuse Vermont, because this is a real specialized set of principles here in instruction, and they are experts in it. And the field does change. It does evolve. I mean, even the years I've been in education, I've noticed shifts in language or just the approach. They're great. They are. And so a lot of our counselors have taken training with them, and that training that they do kind of certifies you to do training with adults and to implement the lessons with students. So they're fantastic, and they will come to your school too. They'll come and do lessons, but it's also nice to have someone the students know, right? A counselor in that role. So that's been a really valuable resource. I know for all the schools in Vermont, they're amazing.
okay, Mindy.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you. I'm Mindy Haskins Rogers. I'm a BUHS alum, and this is great to hear this conversation going on, and that you have experts available. I just had one thing I wanted to add and then a question. The thing I wanted to add is that in the research I've been doing this year, a statistic that recurs constantly is that 1 in 10 students reports sexual harassment or abuse by staff or faculty member in their K-12 experience. So 1 in 10 experience that by an actual employee of the school. So that's such an important component, I think, to bear in mind. And I just wanted to ask if the education for caregivers would also be annual, like your annual staff trainings.
Say that again, Mindy. I didn't hear the full question.
Sorry, would the education for caregivers, for the guardians, also be an annual event, an annual training or educational opportunity?
I think it would be an annual opportunity, but we need to continue to look at how we approach it in multiple ways throughout a school year.
Yes.
I think a one and done approach to professional development certainly lacks in regards to approach where you're coming at it in multiple ways throughout a school year. So I think we need to look at how to increase opportunities to engage, with all stakeholders.
Thank you.
Any other?
I have a quick question. Is this specifically just elementary schools, or is there opportunity for it branching into middle school education and high school education?
Yeah, I think they had already done their presentations. So this was more focused on elementary, but yeah, think Mr. Spino is saying is that district-wide, we'll all talk about our practices and.
Trying to be more unified.
Right, okay.
And more aware of what each school is doing.
Can I just add something? Just talking about, how there are differences between the younger and the older kids. My kindergarten teacher does a great job of explaining consent in a way that makes sense to 5-year-olds. So it really does happen as young as kindergarten and even a little bit in pre-K. But it's, continuous work that we do all the time, but that foundation is really important. And starting that young, I mean, those kids by the end of the year know what consent is, and that word is used in conversation with them. And so that was kind of in light of all of the things that have come up recently, but it happens now more and more frequently. And it's really nice to hear that kids understand consent at such a young age and then can carry that on with them. And I think that's, when we talk about a district-wide approach, we're really talking about starting with our youngest kids and teaching them in an age-appropriate way so that they have the confidence as they get older to understand what's happening and what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, and then being able to report if something does not feel right to them. So
find that, since you're talking about kindergarten, do you find that helps in other areas like consent of sharing things? And do you think that kind of theme carries over?
it does. Yeah, not as explicitly probably. We do a lot of work around consent, like, young kids, they like to hug or hold hands. And they have to ask in the classroom. They have to say, can I please have a hug? And, so it's very clear. Mostly it's about that physical touch, but there are times, when kids are not sharing where it would be appropriate to say, well, did you have consent to take that from your friend? And just the use of the word, it is a little bit sad that we have to understand that at the age of 5, but it is important to know because it is a lifelong skill word that you should have to stand up for yourself.
So my family member, Carter, who is at your school, he is reminded to ask, did you ask first before touching that person, whether that person is an adult or another child? Right. So I hear it in his world. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll say too, I don't actually think it's sad. I think it's healthy. I think it's good communication and that we have to talk to 5-year-olds with respect and show them that respect and say, well, just sharing my thought, but I think it's a wonderful thing to reinforce that concept of autonomy. And, it really aligns with sort of restorative approach with working with kids and validating them and how you feel you can own it. And all of it all really ties together and raising whole people. So yeah, I think it's wonderful.
So do we have any other questions online, comments?
Sure. So moving on with an update to the SRO recommendations. And just to be clear, we will not have an SRO in the school building next year. I think that's been clarified in the spring. So we took a different approach to the presentation today and really asking Tracy put this together. And I'll just leave it at that. Let you guys.
Correct. What is the easiest way, Paul? I can share my screen.
Yeah, you're online. You're enabled to share screen. Go up there.
Yeah, it should. It will not have the special effects that Kate's Yeah, so, Chris Day had provided, I think in the spring, sort of a report in regards to the recommendations on the SRO, from the SRO committee. And And there hasn't really been any change in what he provided in terms of, we will continue to collaborate on the possibility of having a liaison with the PD. We'll continue to work with the students who served on that committee because that was really important. And I enjoyed that also. They have a very valuable voice in our school, but it felt like a better approach to present you with tonight was to share with you the work that we've really done this summer in developing some systems of support to address some of what we saw last year. Hold on, I just have to adjust mine. So there's some important things that we want to preface this with, information being shared tonight is fluid and can be modified and will probably need to be modified based on the needs of our staff and our students. So statements, in this presentation have been shared with myself and other administrators, but may not represent the views of all. I've tried to be really respectful of the summer that my staff needed and not bug them too much. I did want to call out though, we had a lot of, we contributed a lot. We had the opportunity with some of the stakeholders, Gina Honorato, our Director of Counseling, our SAP, Ricky Davidson, our Student Engagement Social Worker, Alexandra Keep, the Diversity Coordinator for the district, Michaela Sims, Mike Sostak, our Restorative Justice Coordinator, and Winston Salesman, who is the Student Engagement Coordinator, were some of the voices that really helped with contributing to the work and providing us with ideas and drafts and thoughtful conversations. And so, although it's been shared with some staff, I did send it out to all staff this afternoon because I felt like, I wanted them to give them a heads up that, this would be shared at the board meeting, and for transparency and just, communicating well with my staff. I wanted to give them the opportunity to see as well what I had shared with the board. But there may be future edits. And so the main goal though was to find some systems of support for our students and our staff that are thoughtful, equitable, and trauma informed with a focus on social justice and restorative practices. So the challenges of last year, I won't focus on too much, but it's important to say. So, we saw students and adults return to school with significant amounts of trauma and numbers never before seen in a school setting. And this, we saw non-engagement and increased truancy among our students. We saw, us as a school not having enough or necessary services to support the students facing challenges. We had an ineffective, outdated punitive model of discipline versus a more proactive restorative model. We really lacked the opportunity for important collaboration among our staffs, teachers, support staff, and administration to address the increase of students facing challenges and problem solve solutions. We had to be very reactive. We lost the inability to be proactive in regards to the issues of concern around the school. And we saw increased anxiety and depression among not just our students, but staff throughout our building. And the effects that this had was, students were not available to learn and not engaged. We saw an increased substance abuse on grounds. Staff, possibly feeling unsupported by administration and other faculty members, a decreased climate and morale throughout the building. There was an absence of a sense of community where it had once been. Many students and staff felt disconnected, alone, and isolated. And our discipline referrals were higher than ever, just by a substantial amount. But our numbers of suspensions decreased. And sort of why I added that and why that's important to know is that I think we found that, suspension is not a logical consequence. And when you're seeing behaviors such as class cuts, suspending them for that, it's not going to solve the issue. That's a symptom of a greater issue. And so we really had to look for alternatives to that, as we should have. And so systems of support to address the challenges that we faced last year, we're going to be implementing a student support team. which is going to meet weekly to discuss students of concern. My next slide is a diagram that sort of shows that. Students can be referred by teachers or any other staff members in the building. So if there's a behavior such as truancy in a class or something else that makes a teacher or staff member feel like this student needs some more support, they can refer them and be part of the conversation. Information shared with the team, such as circumstances contributing to the concern, services the student receives, and other valuable non-confidential information can be shared here. So we do have students that work with counselors and share information that is confidential and should stay that way. The team has the opportunity to discuss interventions to try, as well as any that have been unsuccessful. So in last year, it very much felt like we were all kind of working in our own silos. So I could be trying something that the counselor has attempted 5 times over that did not work for them. The chance it was going to work for me was highly unlikely, but this information wasn't available. But most importantly, through this process, there'll be next steps for the students, so we can continue to collaborate on ways to support them until we find what works. Oftentimes it's not an immediate, we'll try this, problem solved, right? We have to be able to collaborate and come up with solutions. And I think we have a lot of valuable voices that should be able to sit at the table together to figure this out. So this is is a diagram, and it's not a flow chart, but I can explain sort of what this visual really encompasses. So, it's student-centered always. So you see in the center, the student needs support. And they may be working with a counselor, they may have a caseworker that they work with, but that's what we're centered around. And then we can have the conversations about what other resources do we have to provide to the student to sort of, help with their challenges, support them, improve student engagement. It's sort of almost like a wraparound support. So this is going to look differently for every student. Perhaps it's referral work with mixed staff and restorative justice program. Maybe we look towards an alternative type of instruction, such as flexible pathways, our community-based learning or our virtual high school. Maybe they need some mental health support or some addiction support. We have service providers that, and maybe it's, we need to try 5 different approaches before we find something that works. But I think as long as we're doing the work collaboratively to come up with a solution, and obviously, bringing families in as well. I did not include this, but them in this, and they're an important piece. So I think, ideally a student of concern would come forward. We as support staff could figure out what interventions have been tried, what we can try, and bring the family in when we need that extra support and communicate with them as well, obviously. The second intervention or system of support we're implementing is a specific space next to our restorative justice program. It's going to be run by our student engagement coordinator, Winston Salesman, and assisted by a support paraprofessional. Winston has an amazing skill set and ability to connect with students. And I really feel strongly that was something that we did not use to its full capacity last year. And it was a really big missed opportunity. And him and I have had many conversations about what this room will look like. And I'm very excited. We also, are looking for a half-time student engagement social worker. Shameless plug if anyone in the community is interested. But I do foresee that person having a place in this room. And to be involved in the process, but when that person comes aboard, I also want their voice and how they envision that looking. So I think that's important. This room is not a punitive measure. It is not an in-school suspension. It's a space. The staff in the space are here to support staff working with our students to help them identify and process through challenges. So in working with teachers as well, to support academics whenever possible. So that might look like a student feeling more comfortable doing their math work in there. because, their anxiety it doesn't seem possible at this moment in time for them to be in the math classroom. But giving them that space. And teachers, will not be referring students directly. So it's not this student has a challenging behavior, I'm going to call down Winston and send this kid out of there, which I don't foresee our teachers doing, but I think it's important to have that conversation. We have amazing teachers that I think, come from a place of support, but I do think that this is a resource that they can lean on as well when they need. And being right next to our restorative justice room, it is really kind of perfect, because when Winston and I were speaking about this, he did say, I foresee if there's a challenging situation where, a student is not engaging in a class, it may not be due to anything that the teacher is doing. It may be due to something the student is experiencing. But using restorative practices and like SOSTAC and, bringing that teacher into the conversation so that teacher can be aware and find ways to support that student struggling. And then I do hope that there's additional opportunities, and I will continue for advisories and ACE groups that foster student leadership in this room and really work towards creating equity and social justice throughout our BUHS community. I think, that could definitely be utilized in this room. And then I just wanted to add some additional measures that our admin team is looking to implement to really improve the school climate. We want to utilize groups such as faculty council, leadership council, student groups, whenever possible, to create a more collaborative leadership system, because I think that that's important. Providing staff with trauma-informed training by Dave Melnick. He is one of the leading, trainers in the state for trauma-informed practices. And my understanding is prior to COVID, they started to implement this, and then COVID hit. We haven't taken advantage of it, but I really think there's a cohort of teachers that actually worked with him during that to sort of bring it back. And our new dean of students, Hannah Parker, was one of them. And so initially my thought was we should do these trainings in small, intimate groups to make it more comfortable. And so I had Hannah reach out to this cohort to see if they'd be interested in being the staff that facilitated that. And every single one of them said, no, we need Dave. Like, this is what we need. So in listening to that, I'm super excited. We're going to, the afternoon of Friday, we come back. Utilizing our restorative justice coordinator as a first response to challenging situations in our school community, and teaching and modeling valuable restorative practices. And then, providing space for our restorative justice coordinator to operate. Again, that was in being reactive as opposed to proactive last year. It seems like that was something we missed out on. We really want to implement an open door policy for staff. This can be challenging and isn't always feasible, but we can be intentional and really make that attempt, and sort of restructuring our faculty meetings and improving the system of communication for our staff. And I want to say that a lot of this is not coming from admin, but sort of in a response to a really productive meeting Mark and I had with our faculty council in the spring in regards to, ways that they saw we could improve for our community. And then creating and supporting community building outside of the classroom. Diversity days, Michaela did an amazing job working with the Aware Group on Diversity Day. You remember we had dance party last week. It was great. And, and it was an optional day. And I really feel firmly that, it shouldn't be optional. We should be celebrating this and we should be doing the work. So, making days like that happen. Super fun Fridays. I don't know if we had a name for it, but there was one Friday throughout the year, one of our teachers organized where every teacher in the school picked something that they were interested in away from their curriculum area. We had teachers knitting. One was building birdhouses. A couple of them were doing things outside. They picked it. Students decided that they, where to go based on either, they like that teacher, they like the activity, their friends were going there. And it's kind of funny to reflect because as administrators prior to it, we were all anxious, like this could go badly, right? But it was amazing because, it gave students the opportunity to see their teachers in a different light, to just be enjoying that community. So we need more days like that. And then, you know, I would love to empower our students to develop their own initiatives for school improvement and community building. So, you know, we have the resources there that ask the students that serve on the SRO, you know, study panel. That's a perfect example of a group of student leaders, you know, that we want to encourage and empower. You know, and then recognizing and celebrating our incredible school community. So often it's easy to hear the bad or focus on the bad. Whenever possible, you know, notes of gratitude, gestures of kindness, such as bringing coffee and cake. The previous assistant principal and I, one Thursday afternoon, we looked at each other, we were like, we should just get some coffee and put it in the mailroom tomorrow. Like, we didn't even think it was a big thing. My sister-in-law owns a bakery, and so I stopped and just happened to grab some cakes, and we set it up and we emailed teachers. The response we got from staff about how meaningful that was to them, and it was really a small gesture, but things like that, I think, you know, we can really, we really need to do more of, you know, and things like, maybe it's covering a teacher's class for 10 minutes so they can just have a break when they need it. Things like that are all very important. So I wanted to end this with a quote that we found that I think really encompasses this. Staff is all getting BUHS shirts with this on the back so we can, you know, see it. But the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate. To sum up moving forward. I'm a talker, so that's a question.
So for I'm jumping back to the slide where you sort of had all these different resources.
Yeah, do you want me to go back so you can?
Sure. Maybe it'll help me focus on remember what I was going to say. I guess I'm just wondering, like, how encompassing is this for all students versus like maybe a really clear student who needs intervention? That feels like very different, but we are in a situation where we have, like, we're all traumatized after the last couple of years, right?
Really, a really valid point. So, you know, this is in regards to one student of concern that's referred, but we really need to be implementing trauma-informed restorative practices into our community and, you know, supporting our staff to do that in terms of, you know, trying to heal from what we've all experienced. So while this is in response to, you know, one student that may be cutting a class, I think, you know, I think that's really hard work that we have to continually do, and we have to revisit that. You know, obviously MTSS, you know, that's a focus and whatnot, but I think in coming back this year, and through thoughtful collaboration on what our PD days look like, we really want to start to implement those practices again and support our staff in doing it, and recognizing our staff has their own trauma, and we need to support them as admin. You know, we can't expect staff to have trauma-informed practices if we don't. So that raises a valid point, and that's continual work that I don't know I could have encompassed it on a visual like this. But I think
Can I talk about one strategy?
you totally can.
Okay, awesome.
Yes,
So,
Stefan,
I mean,
anytime.
and like Cassie's describing, this is maybe urgent, you know, this is what one student is brought to the team, but there were strategies that were discussed coming from student support. Ricky was one that we talked about it with, looking at trends and data through our system, the educator handbook and different systems, and looking at that next layer. These kids aren't like red and flaring every day, but what are some trends that they're seeing that shows that they may be falling through the cracks or not being at their best?
Yeah, one thing that Ricky Davidson, our SAP, did, and I didn't even know until he brought to my attention, is he set some parameters for finding students of concern proactively. And he wants to, you know, reach out to families and offer them some support even before entering the classroom, and not you know, share that it's a student of concern. But when you lead coming from a place of support, oftentimes, you know, it works much better than when there's already been an issue, a problem that you're trying to solve, you know. So.
And I'm also wondering if just because I'm seeing all these excellent resources.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if a student, maybe they're maintaining, maybe they're more or less a rule follower, but is there, or could there be awareness, so that it's not so much like a knock on your counselor's door, which because they might not have a relationship, but can there be awareness that there's support available and that there's an avenue to reach out as the student themselves to get that support?
So one activity that was done last year and will be done this year in the first few days in advisory is we ask our students to name 3 to 5 adults in the building that they feel safe with. And that information is stored in PowerSchool. And it's a way that, we can know that students feel like they have that. And I think also, connections and relationships are so important. And so I know that there's students that I might not interact with, throughout the year as much in a different role, but like those are still my kids that I'm going to be checking in on, and so I think those are important as well. I joke I have 753 kids, but it is true. So I think working as a community to support all of them.
I think a good point, and it takes time, is the importance of marketing and sharing with the community what systems are in place and how can you access supports. And that's marketing with your students, with your teachers, and then of course families as well.
Yeah. Yes.
I want to thank you for one of the most encouraging reports from the high school that I've heard in my 3.5 years on the board.
Didn't start.
What's so encouraging, Cassie and Tracy, is you're so forthright and candid in the problems and the challenges, and also acknowledging the successes. And we all know that trust and confident leadership is built on authentic, candid conversations like this. You were very specific in the problems that the school is facing.
And I always go back to this when we joke about it. Like, our school has such good bones. And what I mean by that is we have a wealth of dedicated, longtime educators that bring so much to the table. And I think I've shared this before, sometimes you hear a teacher has been teaching for 35 years and you're sort of like, oh, because their practices haven't changed in 35 years. That's not what we have. We have an amazing staff and we are so lucky to have them. And so, a job as admin is to support them and work to improve the school.
You do have an amazing staff, and the kind of collaborative leadership that you're showing can only make the school better. That was a wonderful report, and it just leaves me much more confident in the future for BUHS and your leadership. So thank you so much.
Like, it should be noted that it's like not just like personal, like, yay, we have an amazing staff. But I know I actually just bumped into, I was closing pages and Paul had shared a database where we kind of could see how our school performs across the state, and just happened to be open to our schools. And so I just started browsing it, and like we were like an exceptional when it came to our student staff relationship. And we saw that in our climate survey reports that have been shared with us, but it's like backed by the data. It's not just our opinions because we like each other.
Do we have any other questions?
Okay, that brings us to the presentation on MTSS development. And as I've shared many times throughout last school year, MTSS development was a major goal for our school system in all of our schools. So we collectively dedicated significant agenda time to identifying MTSS best practices throughout the school year last year, which led to the development of a master schedule approach in how we utilize our resources in the most efficient way possible, so that kids are getting the support that they need. And we have 2 examples today, an elementary example and then an example at BAMS. Else, I'll leave it at that. Who wants to go first? Mary?
He's volunteered me. We'll start with elementary. Paul, I'll share my screen. Does that work?
All right.
I'm out of practice. There we go. All right. So this is master scheduling at Oak Grove School. And like Mark said, we took a really year-long approach to looking at MTSS or MLSS, multi-layered systems of support, which we're switching to, I think. And it just so happened that it coincided with some of the work that came up at the leadership team at Oak Grove School. So luckily our thoughts were aligned. So we didn't have to go back and do too much revisioning, but this is a look at the process we took at Oak Grove. So I have a leadership team that meets twice a month and we really, prior to this year, wanted to focus our work on a topic and a theme and take that through the year and grow as a school to implement all of that work for the following year. So we really do like a cyclical work and systematic work across the year, preparing us for the next round of school year work. What we determined this year was that a shift was needed in the way that the master schedule was developed in order to best meet the needs of students. A common practice that was in place, the first master schedule I made at Oak Grove School had equitable distribution of resources to each classroom, human resources to each classroom. And then the pandemic hit, so we never really got to identify whether that worked or not. And then we had a year of hybrid learning. And so there was no distribution of people because they were all teaching in classrooms. And then we started off this year. And one of the comments that got brought to the leadership team was that, I had an academic support teacher working in 2 classrooms, 2 different grade levels. And they mentioned that, well, I'm in there equal amount of time, but one class needs significantly more support than the other. And so that was where we started. We were like, why are we giving everybody the same thing when we know we can meet kids' needs if we identify what those needs are and meet their needs that way? So we wanted to make a shift to a needs-based intervention, and support we decided that would be more beneficial. We would use data specifically to drive our decisions around creating a master schedule. And we would get feedback monthly at our staff meetings from the faculty, and that was all teachers, including classroom teachers, specialist teachers, academic support teachers, and special educators. Our paras do not generally join those meetings, although they are invited, but we do meet with paras separately. So they did get a little bit of insight into the master scheduling as well. This work really started in November 2021. We have those 2 PD days before our Thanksgiving break. And we completed the Vermont MTSS system screener as a staff. This came from our admin level, where we did complete this as an administrative team for the district. We were asked to do this work at our own schools. And so I thought it was a great way to start this work with the staff at Oak Grove School. It gave us a way to identify areas of strength within our school and areas where we could use some improvement. And the MTSS screener looks at 5 categories: systemic and comprehensive approaches, effective collaboration, high quality instruction and intervention, balanced and comprehensive assessment systems, and expertise. And I will show you, if I can pull it up. This is what where is it? New share. There it is. This is what the system screener looks like. There are those 5 characteristics or 5 categories, and underneath each of those are characteristics.
And so on that first day in November, we went through this process. It took about 3 to 4 hours, but it was useful. And we read each characteristic. Everybody privately gave a rating of a 1, which is not yet established, 2 in progress, and 3 well established. And then we had a 5-minute discussion about that characteristic. And then we voted again. And so we kind of, at the end, we had 2 votes. We had where people thought we were, and then we had where, after, communicating with one another and everybody getting involved in the discussion, we were able to determine where we really felt that we were. So that drove some of our work around building a master schedule. Now I'm going to see if I can do this again. Coming back into practice. Okay. And that's why you see those pre and post scores. So this area here, balanced and comprehensive assessment system, was obviously a place where we felt we had a little bit of room to grow. But there were some other changes, expertise went down a little bit. We just felt like we didn't have the opportunity to share out the expertise, and we did take notes. So I actually was the note taker, allowing my voice to be off and everybody else's voice to be on, which was a nice role for me to play. Often, I'm doing all the talking. So it was good to hear everybody else get to do the discussion, and I just got to capture it. So that's where we started in November, and that did come from the admin team. We did that as a leadership team as well. And then in December, we used a staff meeting to share out school-wide data from the fall benchmarking. We looked at math and literacy data, and we asked staff to engage in the discussion regarding the data that they were presented. So this is the first time since I've been at Oak Grove where we have looked as a whole school at data. Usually we look in teams. So it's, maybe your K1 team or your 2-3 team. But this was all faculty sitting in the room, able to look and analyze the school-wide data. We asked the faculty to think about the questions at the top. What is your reaction? What do you notice? What are you wondering about? That we did a think, pair, share around that. And then we moved on to considering next steps. So looking further into the data, what predictions can we make? How are students' needs currently being met? What are the barriers? And what are the implications? What changes can we make? And we put charts up around the library, and staff were able to chart their responses to those questions. So it was anonymous. And then we discussed that as a whole. And then in February, we had our winter benchmark data. So we were able to look at the winter benchmark data, and we did the same process. We did that think, pair, share. What do you notice about this winter data now? And then we talked about where we could go from there. And then we compared the fall to the winter data to see if the trends we had thought about in the fall or in December were accurate, and if we made accurate predictions. And if not, what were some adjustments that could be made? We determined as a staff that we would look at other data sources next, which were our social, emotional, and behavioral data. We would analyze those at future meetings. So this is a quick look at the data that we compared. This is the math data that we get. We use Forefront, K through 6. Paul can help me if I mess this up. But the math data does not compare fall to winter. It's really assessing what kids have learned in their core instruction. Is that right, Paul? Yes. Practice that. So it's not a true comparison of like, oh, the kindergartners went from one student, in the red to no students in the red. that obviously did happen, but it's not the same questions that they're asking. So it's really looking at the overall core instruction. How effective is the core instruction in these benchmark times? It's a little different than the way we look at literacy data. So we're still getting used to this because prior math data did allow us for that kind of comparison. But as you can see, we had some effective instruction happening where students were gaining skills and mastering skills more frequently from their core instruction. This looks at our literacy data, which is we use DIBELS on the oral reading fluency. We don't assess this in kindergarten and first grade at the beginning of the year. The first time first graders are assessed is in winter. So again, we looked at this data, and this is where we saw the biggest need and the biggest areas where the support we were providing was not targeted enough. So it's clear that our youngest kiddos, those second graders, were in kindergarten when the pandemic hit. It's pretty typical trend across, I would say, the country. They missed out on some pretty significant instruction. And then first grade was spent in a hybrid model. And kindergarten and first grade, we know, are crucial to learning those foundational skills. So what we determined as a staff was that that's where our support needed to be. Grades 1 through 3, or next year's 2 through 4, really will need and will benefit from more intervention, more support in the core instruction time. And by looking at this data and allowing everybody in the school to see it, it was no longer a question of, well, they get 90 minutes and I only get 30. Why? Well, now we know why. It's because the data is telling us that's where the intervention needs to happen. That's where more support needs to take place. So that was the end pretty much of looking at our academic data. The leadership team felt like we had presented what we needed. There were more slides that we went through, but I won't bore you with all the data. So that was the bulk of the academic data that we looked at. When we got to March, we used behavioral and social emotional data to identify areas of need. We use SWIS. We are a PBIS school. I can't tell you what the acronym SWIS stands for, but I could probably look it up, unless you know Paul. He's going to look it up for me. Oh. And SWIS tracks our office behavior referrals. So anytime a student, there's an infraction of some sort, a teacher will fill out this behavioral referral and it comes to the office. And it's a way just for us to track trends that are happening. We use that most often to identify, where are we seeing the biggest behavior and when is that happening? And that's what we did as a staff, is we looked at that and determined, I believe it was recess on Thursdays was where we were seeing the most amount of behavioral referrals. And we were like, well, we can kind of address this in the classroom, but this is really a school-wide thing that we need to address. So we determined as a staff that we would take a school-wide approach to improving our behavioral data as well as our SEL data, which is Panorama, and our school climate survey. We reviewed things that were in place and that we wish were back in place. We have really missed all schools saying it is wonderful virtually, but it's not the same. And Oak Grove has been well known. I would say all the Brattleboro town schools have been well known for their all school things over the years. And we're really, fingers crossed, hoping to bring it back next year. It was a real loss for our community. And I feel
The staff really, that is all they wanted, was All Schools Sing Back, a time for us to come together as a community. It's also where we can address a lot of these school-wide issues that we were seeing. School-wide information systems, Swiss. In April, we moved on to, so we looked at all this data, and then we realized, well, teachers and everybody needs the support to make effective change. And so what we decided, and this came from our admin team as well, was that we needed to improve our inclusive practices in the classroom. And that in order to do that, we needed to put into place effective supports for staff as well as students. Jamie Scanlon is our instructional coach, and she did a great job of finding some different models and strategies that can be used to increase inclusion in the classroom, differentiated approaches, co-teaching approaches. And we also reviewed the aspects of 173. I did not touch any funding formulas with my staff because I said that didn't have anything to do with us. Frank can do that. And, but we did talk about the implications of what Act 173 can do for us in terms of opening up special education and special educators being able to work with other students who are not identified on IEPs, and also really increasing the time that students on IEPs are able to interact with their peers in small group instruction and whole group instruction. So those were the highlights we talked about with that. Here's where I feel like I'm most proud, because these are the process changes and systems changes that we came up with at Oak Grove School. And these are the inclusion non-negotiables that we came up with at the leadership level, and they align pretty closely. So we were on the right track, and the staff really, through this process, bought into the work that we were doing because they were a part of the process. And that's really the goal that I have when working with my staff as a whole. Me going in and telling people to do something is probably less effective than everybody getting on board and understanding why changes need to be made. So as a school, we identified that master schedule adjustments needed to be made. Team structures and common planning time would be built into the schedule daily or weekly. Sorry, daily would be a lot. Collaborative planning, including Jamie Scanlon, our instructional coach, would be available. So she will be a part of all of those collaborative planning times. We would embed UDL implementation as much as possible in the work that we're doing as a whole staff. We would create a system for organizing and accessing differentiated resources. So we're really working on finding a way to have an online folder where if you need to find a place to get different leveled resources or reading material for this topic, here's where you go. So that's easy to access. It's there and it's available for anybody who needs it. We wanted to have a whole school strategy. Again, like I talked about, this was our theme for the year. Next year, we're going to read this book, Your Students, My Students, Our Students. It's a book about inclusive classrooms. And that will be our theme. As many of you know, I won't be there for a few months. So a book is a nice way to carry a theme. And so that's the plan for staff next year. So we're working on pulling strategies out of this book that can be practiced throughout the school year. We do monthly, I'm sorry, it's called Your Students, My Students, Our Students.
And Green Street.
Everybody's stealing my ideas.
We didn't plan that.
It's a good book. I've brought it up every year, I think. This is the first year people have actually been able to, I've actually been able to get it going. We do monthly vertical team meetings. So Generally, those are smaller teams, but we have thought about doing all primary together, all upper, just creates a bigger team and allows for more conversation. I know peer observation is something we'll talk about this coming year at the admin level. And we've talked a little bit about it before. I know Julianne, Kate, and I went to some trainings, and that was the topic of conversation. It is not up and running yet at Oak Grove School, but it's a great opportunity to continue this work. And, really developing a strong assessment plan and getting all teachers on board with how to use that assessment plan. How much is too much? How are we using the data? What do we do with the progress monitoring we're doing? So really, again, buying into the data that we're using because it is valuable information. So as a school, that's where we were. And as a leadership team, similar goals: increased inclusion, a common understanding of layered supports, common team or weekly collaboration time, school-based approaches for setting up routines, a clearly defined EST process. Notice that check mark. It is all done, which is great. And special education services are in addition to core and tier 2 or layer 2 intervention needs. So that is a major goal of the master schedule we created. And then we got to May, and we came up with our data-based decisions for this upcoming school year. As a staff, we agreed that grades 1 through 4 should receive the most support in literacy based on student need. The goal for the master schedule is that 90 minutes of academic support and classroom teacher time will be in the classrooms that need that level of support. In students in grades 5 and 6, based on the data, needed a little less support in literacy. And kindergarten is a little hard to judge at the beginning of the year. So they'll start with less time, but there is a plan in place to alter our master schedule in the second half of the year if we see that there's a significant need. Or if we meet all of the goals and mastery, then we can shift around the academic support team. Based on the math data, the leadership team determined that 60 minutes of support across the grade levels, except for kindergarten again, should be sufficient. And this support could change again in the second semester, depending on how our students are doing. And finally, we did not want to neglect the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of our students. So we wanted to include regular common planning time. This will meet those needs, but also academic planning needs. It's necessary and will include all team members, academic support teachers, special educators, classroom teachers, and the para-educators when available. Sometimes they are supporting kids in the specials classroom when the teachers are planning. Planning meeting templates are in the process of being created to ensure that the time is efficient and effective and that the meetings are productive. We're encouraging and expecting daily morning messages in each classroom that are reflective. This would set a positive tone and intention for the day. In grades 4 through 6, this message should be prepared for the students when they enter the room to help build their independence and routines and support emotional regulation. Again, we're working on providing resources for that. And finally, we are asking all classrooms to do a daily morning meeting to check in on student social emotional needs and to increase student engagement and build community. Once again, we are dedicated to providing resources and activities that can be used during that time if teachers need it. And finally, these are the things that we know we need to consider as a leadership team and as a school moving forward. We need to be proactive in the way we approach behavior, really explicit instruction of the expectations and the routines that we want in our classrooms and on the playground and in the cafeteria and the gym. And then practice those expectations, reviewing them often and repeating, providing many opportunities to practice the expectations, the norms, and the structures. We're looking for consistent protocols, procedures, and language for handling behavior. and additional support for integrating social emotional learning into our academic instruction. At Oak Grove School, we do use Second Step, which is a social emotional curriculum. Our school counselor teaches that on Mondays, and then they can practice that during the week. And that is a standalone lesson, but she does do that. So how do we build that in? How do we find ways to build that lesson or skill that they learn on Monday into the work we do during the school week? We're continuing to work on supports for effective co-planning and co-teaching. Those are new for some staff. And so, you can't just do it. You have to understand how to plan together, how to teach together. And there are different resources available and models for making that happen. Some of them are included in this book, which I'm excited to get to that chapter. And then the use of menus, have-tos and get-tos, and the understanding that this all takes time. Kids can't be independent on day one. Well, they can be. I should not say they can't be. Kids can be independent, but to get them to do all of the things that we need them to do every day, we have to practice and take time to understand that everybody achieves these things at different times. So being patient with ourselves and understanding that, you may set a group of kids off to work independently for a little while, and they're loud and they're talking. But if you remind them of the expectations, you give them the chance to practice it, they can master that and they can become independent learners. So that was a very long overview of the process we took at Oak Grove School. I don't know how to get out of this. Oh, there we go. If just a quick view of this, this is going to be hard to see, but this is where you can see the supports that are available in the classrooms. It just lists who's available in each room. I'm wondering if maybe I can make it bigger. So you'll see it's labeled special educator and an academic support teacher. So in this classroom, second grade, Laura is an academic support teacher. She's available for 60 minutes of support in that classroom. So part of the whole class instructional time and some intervention time could be available. Let's look at third grade. And here, third grade, which was an area where we knew our second graders going into third grade, we're going to need a good chunk of literacy support. So Brian is our academic support teacher that works with that grade. So he's available for 90 minutes of literacy instruction. Here would be like a whole class, a core instruction, where co-teaching could happen with the classroom teacher. Small groups can happen during these times, or all three teachers could be in the room at the same time working in stations and utilizing different models of instruction. And then just a quick look at, it's harder to see with it so big, but as you can see, we have everybody scheduled for common planning every week. So these are the people who would be available for that. Again, it's the academic support teacher, the special educator, and the classroom teacher paras when available. This does mean that there are days when, for example, Tom is a special educator with our older kiddos. He may only get to see sixth graders 4 days a week, but 1 day a week he is planning with the team, which is as valuable because then that work can be used in the classroom with the students. So there are adjustments that have to be made there. And if we need to make shifts, we will. That's where we're starting. I think that's all.
So I think maybe we will take a 5-minute break. And that,
We have a hand up.
oh, I'm sorry. Let's get Jamie Crumpler first. And after that, we will take a quick break. Jamie.
Hi, I was really excited by this presentation. Thank you for all your work. I was curious what strategies exist in our district of partnerships in the community and how we've been talking in Putney for the last couple of years about how to get tutors, maybe underutilized resources in the community, elders who might be interested in tutoring to kind of mentor or work with students. And I'm thinking about before and after school programming and how do we take some of this data and incorporate it into before and after school programming at every school. So those are just some of the questions that came up for me as I looked at your presentation. So thank you.
Well, we certainly do have a goal of increasing after-school programs at all of our schools. That was, we're achieving great work in that direction before the pandemic, which kind of, stopped, frankly, the ability to do that. But those are certainly goals of ours heading into this school year. I would just like to, reflect a little bit on Mary's presentation and make the connection between, collaborative work at a leadership level and then how that can be reflected within a school and a change at the school. And I think Mary clearly showed how she implemented small changes throughout the school year last year with the ability to now identify essentially a game plan to start this school year. And master scheduling is incredibly complicated. It takes a collaborative approach, and you need to know what your standards are going to be for identifying how you go about and create that master schedule. So I think Mary gave a great example of this. Our other schools did the same thing. I'm hoping MTSS is not just a one and done in terms of presenting, because I know other schools would like an opportunity throughout the year to share the work that they've done. And I look forward to Keith's presentation, which shows a little bit different spin at what that looks like at a middle school.
I wrote down organized enthusiasm. So,
Yes.
seems like that's what you pull together. So very much appreciated.
Systems are what I think all administrators live for. So when we can implement good systems, everything, knock on wood, usually works. But it's about a team effort. And, you can't do it alone, like Mark said.
And being able to articulate the why behind it and why it's important to engage in this work and to build the buy-in. And there's an art form to that.
And it takes about a year as you get to get there. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess at 7:35, we will take a recess and we'll be back in 5 minutes. So if we can call the meeting back to order at 7:45. And it looks like we had one more presentation.
Yes, Keith Lyman is going to present on MTSS development at BAMS.
Everyone, thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I was so excited I had this clicker, and I always watch presenters and they can walk around the room and click the next slide. So I got one, and now I don't have to walk around, but because I can do it right from here. But anyway, so if I start pacing around, it's because I want to show off this.
You have to pace it. You have to go.
I'll make the cameraman work though. I was excited to see Mary's presentation because it really complements what I'm going to share with you now. What I shared with the board, I just broke it down into simpler slides here, so a better presentation. But I'm going to give you an overview. Before I do it, I guess I should share, if we can see this, the MTSS Field Guide, which is what all of this work is kind of based upon, of course, good practice. It's 129 pages. And when it's so it's called a comprehensive field guide. It is incredibly detailed, but very good. So all of this work that we're showing you is based on this field guide. So if you have 129 pages of.
Excuse me, we don't have any audio online.
Do I need to unmute myself? No. All right, I'm good. Yeah, so this is all based on that 129-page document that's really been out there. I think it was first produced in 2014 by the state. MTSS is built on the old acronym of RTI, Response to Intervention, and so it's just a more modern approach. And now they've changed the terminology again to multi-layered systems of support. So we've been trying to do this for a long time, and it's not easy work, as what you just saw Mary do. Everything she presented there that's like years of work to try to really implement well. And we've been trying it at BAMS, different things for quite a while, and I've never felt like we were quite there. And what I'm going to present to you now, I feel like gets us a lot further to where we need to be. And it really comes down to, well, this slide shares with you that I've tried this. I've tried different structural things, used the leadership team, and we just haven't been able to kind of get it to the point that I feel happy with. We'll never be satisfied in the work that we do, and that we're always trying to get better. But it's just something that I have a passion about, and I've struggled with how to figure it out. So in the last year or so, during our leadership team meetings at the SU level, we focused a lot on this. And in particular, in the spring, we spent a lot of time with scheduling. And that work kind of gave me the green light and the confidence to move ahead and try to put into place the things that we need to do. So I had to close my door a lot this spring, because this is complicated to figure out when it comes to the details of scheduling. I'll share a little more in the future here. So secondary, I have all these acronyms, but secondary practices, mainly 7 to 12 in our system. But these practices are the same at the elementary level. We have tiers. So tier 1 is part of MTSS, and that's our what does every student receive? And we've had exclusionary practices in the past in many of our schools across the country, of course, but certainly in Vermont and in particular BAMS, where not all students have had access to tier 1 instruction. They've been pulled out to receive special ed services. So if they were at a 3rd, 4th grade level in math and they were in an 8th grade math class, maybe in the past, they were receiving special ed services, they were pulled out and they received it from a special educator. So they're excluded from their peers. And this is a big shift. This is a big shift for a lot of teachers. I know across the district, this is it's a little bit challenging. And the higher we go, the gaps get bigger and bigger. So tier 2, so we're trying to kind of put solid structures in place for effective tier 1 instruction. Tier 2 is typically students receive some type of additional support. An intervention period, and we'll talk about that. Either an intervention period or simply those levels of support within the regular tier 1 environment. And of course, all those things can happen in a tier 3 support can happen in a tier 1 environment as well. So that's where we're making some of these shifts. Tier 3 is not always special education services, but often is. So that's just that kind of triangle that gives you a little overview. So this presentation is focused on the scheduling changes and some of the adult practices that we need to change to meet all students' needs. So we want to improve this system. And our tiered supports, so all kids are included in the tier 1 environment. And what's happened and we started to make this shift in the last year or two, is we're pulling kids, we're eliminating some of those pull-out special ed classes and putting the kids in the tier 1 instruction, but the teachers don't necessarily know how to meet those students' needs. And it's our job to kind of provide them that training. So that's part of what I'm going to share this evening. We also have not had a comprehensive data collection system, and Mary highlighted some of the work that they're doing at Oak Grove. That's they have a pretty well-developed data system. Ours is, we collect data. It's done a little more at the individual teacher level, sometime at the team level, or we collect it and we use it for some important decisions, but it's just not deeper. It's not as deep as we would like. And it's just not shared. So we got to create systems to share that data to use it more effectively. I'll get into that a little more. And when we share data, it's all about collaboration. So those are a couple of the overall goals. So I touched on this a little bit. In the past, when we've pulled kids out and they haven't been with their tiers, we're saying most students deserve to have the right. And we're trying to say all kids have that right, and we need to make sure that we can provide that support within the tier 1 classes. And so, and Mary touched on this, Kaufman touched on this a little bit, the co-teaching model. We're going to focus on math and English language arts. And that part of that instruction is scaffolded, modified, and differentiated instruction. Those are educational jargon maybe, but it's essentially having multiple ways of meeting all kids' needs, to simplify those words. And so the challenge real, when I say there are very few exceptions to standard practice, we have the very few exceptions. We have a pull-out program for students that have pretty significant cognitive delays. And for years, those kids were completely segregated from tier 1 instruction. Although we tried to get them into, like, they were most of the time in phys ed and art, some of the exploratories, they have not been part of the regular core classes. And so that's changed over the last year or two. And so they're getting into more, especially science, social studies, to work with their peers. But this is a big shift. And we haven't had a lot of time for the teacher who runs that program to collaborate with the classroom teachers to plan for it. So this model helps address that. So schedules in a middle school are very complicated. And I had to try to figure this out so I didn't change everything that's happening with students and with teachers. So I did not change the way the schedule works, which I thought would be a big relief for teachers. Hopefully it is, because we could have blown it up. So that was, something I purposely did to try to make this as reasonable as possible. One of the shifts that we've made is, so if we went back a year ago, I was so happy. We have team meetings, and in the team meetings, the special educators weren't even part of the team meeting. So they often didn't know what was going on. Some of the time they were, some of the time they weren't. And in those team meetings, they were the 4 core teachers, special educator, an academic support teacher, a counselor, maybe a social worker. You have all these adults. They're going to be talking about larger grain, big picture, kind of like field trips and EST plans. They're not talking about curriculum. They're not talking about modification of the science unit. The detailed work that's needed to support kids being in the tier 1 class. So I've made some significant shifts here, and it required kind of taking on some sacred cows, to be honest with you, around some of the time that teachers have traditionally used and reshifted that. We used to try to do 4 academic support teachers co-teaching plus 4 special educators co-teaching, which is 8 people. And they were also teaching separate classes. What I've done is said special educators are going to co-teach. Academic support teachers are not going to simplify things a little bit. There's a variety of benefits to that. There's some that was hard for some people as well to take that away, because some of those academic support teachers, that's the best part of their day. And they've had collaborations for years. And that was a little hard. It was one of those, a little bit of a sacred cow. But special educators will do more pushing into the classrooms. And so this next slide, academic support teachers are doing less of the co-teaching and doing more skills-based work in their exploratory classes. In those academic support classes, there was a lot of great things. There are a lot of great things that happen in those classes. They're generally classes of about 8 students with either a math or an English teacher, basically giving them a fundamental skill support. What wasn't happening in those classes on a little more of a global basis was the data. So if we have students in those classes and we do like what Oak Grove does, a screening, and we do a screening, we should have some type of, it's called progress monitoring, like a check-in on how is that student doing as a result of this intervention that we're providing. And that's called progress monitoring. It may have been done on an individual, like teachers might have been doing it, and special educators often have to do it as part of an IEP, but it was not done on a school-wide basis, and it wasn't shared on a systemic level with each other. And so to share that data and then to sit down and say, well, is this student making the right progress or not? Are we happy with the progress? Is the intervention working or not? And then having the time to go back and say, well, then let's kind of adjust. So all these changes put that planning time in place to look at that data. So I described to you a moment ago, you can imagine 8 teachers in a room, and they always talked about great things. They were things that needed to be discussed, but it wasn't getting down to, that was the missing piece that I've been feeling like we've missed for years, is I'm co-teaching a class with teacher B, but I don't have a formal time to meet with them. And I have no time to, if I'm a special educator, to meet on a formal basis and modify the lesson plans, modify assessments, look at it together, look at it with their grade level colleagues. So if you have 2 8th grade math teachers, we haven't had a structure where the 2 8th grade math teachers sit down together, especially with a special educator, and plan and look at the next 2 weeks. And we got this assessment coming up. How are we going to modify it for the student that might be at a 3rd grade level? So this forces that, and that's part of that sacred cow. This is a lot it's a big jump, because now I'm forcing people to sit down and discuss their instruction, sometimes with someone they barely know. Like we have a couple new teachers who are special educators this year. Suddenly they're going to be sharing a classroom with another teacher. So those are big shifts for educators. And I'm not sure everyone's super excited about that because it's hard. So basically what I've done is taken 5 days. They would have 5 team meetings a week as a large team, and said, now I'm saying every other day you're going to have a team meeting. And on the opposite day, the 2 English teachers are going to sit down with the special educator, and they're going to collaborate. They're going to plan. They're going to look at lessons. They're going to figure out how to modify and meet all kids' needs. That's a big, that's just a big shift. And so it forces the teams to be more efficient with their time when now that they're meeting every other day. They got to prioritize what they're discussing as a full team.
Clinical approach to how you engage in the classroom.
Yeah.
Work together.
Yeah. So let's see. We've also created something called What I Need When, and it's a term most, if not all, the elementary schools have a period like this, I believe, right? Do you guys have when? We've called it different things. We've had something similar. We've called it skills period in the past, but it's been an actual curriculum that's been taught by a teacher. So this is a big shift because this is, I've limited who is teaching during this time. And it's flexible, so kids can move from room to room. Teachers can move kids from room to room, and they can get extra support on homework. They can get, they can have something retaught. They may have left early for a soccer game and they missed some critical instruction. They may have been absent for a few days. They may have failed a test and they really need to have some concepts retaught. So in the past, we really haven't had that structure unless the teacher really went out of their way. The other way we supported this kind of work was the student would stay after school. We call it extensions. But then there's an equity issue with families who don't have transportation, kids who are fried by 3:30 and just don't want to stay home, whatever, don't want to come, whatever the reasons are. So this provides an in-school level of support that we have. It's different than what we've offered in the past. The exploratory teachers would often not really know what to teach during the former skills period, skills block. And so I took that off the table, really wanted this time to be focused on core instruction. Let's see. And so trying to figure out the schedules of like 40 teachers and to create fairly equal assignments as far as load was pretty challenging. When I finally got done with this, it's pretty balanced, which is needed with the staff. If I have some teachers teaching more periods than others, it starts to become an issue. Highlighted some of the AST is academic support team or academic support teachers, used to be called Title I teachers. So their roles are shifting. Mary had mentioned Act 173. Just to summarize what this paragraph says, Act 173 says we have a different funding formula.
Well, you went there. You went funding formula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for many years, what would happen is if we would have to segregate and separate special ed staff from regular ed staff when it came to, like, if I had a special educator who was offering a certain support, we were often told you can't put these students in with them because it doesn't fit the time study. Or we couldn't provide the service for the student unless it was a special educator. Well, I had an academic support teacher who offered the exact same supports. We couldn't do it. So everything was separated. If I needed a student to have speech and language, I would have to set it up separately from what special ed was doing. So we're duplicating roles and services. Now we've taken down what we're trying to do is, I think if you talk to people over time who work in education, will say, we get in the habit of saying that's a special ed student. That's a Title I student. And we're trying to get rid of the labels that we put on students and we're trying to reshift it to it's a student who receives these services. It's a subtle the way to word it, but it's a mentality. And so Act 173 gives us much more flexibility to utilize staff differently. So I'm excited about that. So that first sentence of that second bullet, students can now be grouped based on academic or behavioral needs, not the labels that we've traditionally put on them. That's a pretty big shift. And so we can teach by need and not based on they have an IEP and therefore they must be with this teacher. And yeah, I won't overspeak on that. So that third bullet kind of essentially highlights what MTSS is. It's a whole school data-driven prevention-based framework that's 129 pages long. Academic support teachers will facilitate collecting, analyzing, and reviewing the data, and then meeting with the teachers to share that data and talk about it. I'm excited about having Bryn Tucker on board as our curriculum coordinator, because she's going to help us structure this and kind of plan it and put data systems in place. The other thing that we're going to kind of be working on is the academic support classes are often, the curriculums are kind of created by the teachers. Most of those teachers have been teaching for years. They're great curriculums. We're trying to make the shift a little bit even more driven on the individual student data and what it tells us about their learning, and to try to pre-teach and align a little bit with the core curriculum, so it is in support, so they can pre-teach concepts and terms and prepare kids. So there's a lot there in that bullet. I won't go into everything there. But they're going to be doing the universal screening, the diagnostic assessments, progress monitoring, and help organize it. Oh, I think this is my last slide. So I won't kill you with this. I'll just share really quickly. Teacher schedules now, they are, every time I moved something, it had a domino effect on everything else. So I had to get everything to align, and went through multiple kind of iterations of the schedules. And I think, I'm hoping we don't show up on day one with a major issue. I brought it to, I've put this out there many, many times. I think it works. And it is complicated. Putting 200 some, almost 300 students into the schedule is complicated. So I had to kind of create schedules for the 7th grade academic support teacher. Well, all of them teach both grades, but if they're an advisor on the 8th grade team, the top right is their schedule, and you probably can't read it from here. But so everybody has a different schedule, and the next page has a core teacher's schedule and a exploratory teacher's schedule. So those at this point are in alignment, and I'm excited about that. And then once I got this set up, I had to make sure that when we have an exploratory period, and you will not be able to read that, but it just gives you a view of just how complicated this is. I had to basically, the top left, it says crafts 7. So from 9 to 9:49, Janet Crafts teaches an exploratory period. If you go across, she has up to 18 students in her room. So I kind of put like this is kind of the ideal number, or kind of the cap, and then try to figure out, do we have enough seats for all the students we have during that period? So we don't have like 50 kids in a class or whatever. So we had to, that took a lot of behind the doors work. Just felt like this, 15,000 piece puzzle. And I have my fingers crossed it all works. So in most cases, there's bold numbers at the bottom that kind of say, like this one says 194. On each day, I had to have 194 seats or whatever it was. I had to have more seats than I have students enrolled in that grade in order to not have overflow or have a schedule for every kid. So that was took a lot of kind of finagling. And I think we're there. So that's a broad overview. I am really excited. Mary had mentioned, can I hold up your
Yep.
book? This book, I walked into a teacher's class, into a classroom today and I saw this book. And then I walked in here tonight and I saw this book. And one of the authors is Leanne Young, Jung, and she is coming to BAMS on the first day of in-service.
So I'll be over with my staff.
Yeah, and she's a nationally, she's a author, really highly regarded author, and she's going to help us through some of this. And I'm really excited about that. So, and then it's going to have to be like, we're trying to focus all of our staff meetings on MTSS and creating an academic focus instead of what it's been in the last few years, which is every staff meeting, it's like putting out fires around COVID and really delaying the work that we really need to be doing, which is trying to figure out how to meet all kids' needs. So I hope I didn't go on too long.
Great. Is, anyone have any questions? Anyone online?
Yeah. Most classes, 15 to 18 students. Yeah. This adds a little more than that, some of the other class. Yep.
As you're giving this report, I was thinking about your total enrollment number. So it's a lot of students.
Yeah. It's down a little from what it's been.
Right?
Yeah, it's closer to 260 something this year, 270. It will go back up pretty fast. Seen the numbers of the incoming, next year's incoming seventh grade is going to bring it right back up. So,
yep.
He has shared some significant changes that he's instilling into the school for the school year, framed around how do we support kids and meet the needs of all of our kids. And that's courageous work. So I hope people have had a sense of like what MTSS is, how do we utilize our resources, how to create opportunities to get adults in front of students and use data to drive that instruction and those decisions. That can be fluid throughout a year. Essentially, that's MTSS. Got to look at an elementary approach and then the BAMS. Like I said earlier, hoping for opportunities throughout the year to give updates on our work and on our progress and highlight some of our other schools and the similar work that they're doing around MTSS, but within their unique school cultures as well.
Yeah, I know that from the Leadership Council at Gilbert. John Gagnon talks about MTSS and how important it is. So to think of it district-wide is, it's pretty cohesive.
I appreciated hearing the enthusiasm from everyone, and our fingers will be crossed that everything will go well the first day.
A lot of enthusiasm in August. Better be.
He also talked about having staff meetings reflect the goals of the school and keeping MTSS on the forefront at most staff meetings. So, the staff knows this is what we're doing and we got to work towards it. It's not going to be perfect day one or September, but we got to work towards collaborating to fine tune as we move along, transitioning into a new way of doing things. It is exciting.
Well, thank you very much for those presentations. So we are, and the next item is the sexual abuse investigation update, but actually I should have moved the new school board student advisory committee members earlier in the agenda so that we could, not sure if we're waiting for, if you're here specifically for that, or.
We need to make a motion to extend the meeting.
Oh, yes, and
I don't know how much time we need.
would you like to make a motion to extend the meeting?
I motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes. I don't know what the right amount of time is.
Try 20 and
20. Let's go for 20. We could always motion again.
Is there a second?
Thank
Okay,
you.
so Michelle and Tim, All those in favor of extending the meeting by 20 minutes?
Aye.
Any,
Sorry about that.
any opposed? Okay. So then I guess, Tim?
Sure. We are delighted to announce to the public the names of our 2 new student representatives to the WSESD board, as well as the names of those students who have been selected to serve on the school board student advisory committee. All have accepted their nominations. Kaya Colby, a senior, and Benjamin Berg, a junior, were chosen from a truly remarkable group of candidates to serve as student representatives to the board. Their 1-year terms will begin officially next month, but we already know Kaya and her work on the SRO report and her participation in board meetings. As the board continues to work closely with the schools to advance student learning and to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of all students in the WSESD, Ben and Kaya's voices and those of the students whom they represent will be invaluable. Congratulations to Kaya and Ben, and welcome to the board.
And in addition to the 2 student reps, we are thrilled to announce the first members of the WSESD Student Advisory Committee. This committee will meet at least monthly on the BUHS campus. They will promote communication with the board and provide us with insights on issues, policies, concerns, and opportunities which they identify as important. This committee is another direct link between the board and our most important stakeholders, the students themselves. So serving on the Student Advisory Committee are Cyrus Smith, Emma Gregan, I apologize if I mispronounce these names, Habame Shoals Karabakakis, Lucy Corbin, Magdalena Keppel, Miles Ackerman Hovis, Skylar Schuer Sampson, and Thea Wepaloki. My apology for the pronunciation, but these are truly outstanding individuals. They are bright, committed to their school, and they understand their responsibility to represent diverse viewpoints and to work for all of their fellow students. We'd like to add that we found them to just be really nice, interesting people. It was a privilege to interview them, and we thank them for accepting this opportunity to advise the board on policies and issues that matter.
So then I guess we will go back to the sexual abuse investigation update. I will say that the board is expecting a report from the investigator very soon, potentially by the end of this week. Then, so then hopefully, and that means by our next meeting, which I anticipate will be on August 23rd, I'm hopeful that we will have something to present to the public. So we also did have we've worked, a few board members have worked with Mark and some of the administration on the communication plan that we had talked about and was put out last meeting. And so we came up with it was a contribution of a couple different locations. I think Vermont Digger had some had a press release. So there was a compilation from a few different sources that was actually provided to the supervisory union as a draft. And we did then get some suggestions from Mindy. And so there is a revised draft for the board to discuss and approve. And I can read that. Help wanted with school abuse investigation. Windham Southeast School District is asking past and present members of our communities to come forward with any information they feel may help our investigation. regarding sexual abuse of students and or harassment or abuse of power by current or former faculty, administration, and staff of the WSESD, including Brattleboro Union High School, Brattleboro Area Middle School, formerly Brattleboro Junior High, and any of our district elementary schools. You do not need to be a victim of abuse or harassment to help. Any information you share could help our investigation. To report information regarding sexual abuse of students and or harassment or abuse of power by current or former faculty, administration, or staff of the Windham Southeast School District, please do so at southernvermontlaw.com/WSESD. If you would like to speak with an investigator, please provide your name and contact information. Information provided, including names and contact information of those reporting information, will remain confidential unless disclosure is required by mandatory reporting laws in Vermont, in which case information will be reported to Vermont's Department for Children and Families as required, and that agencies' privacy protocols will take precedence. If you prefer to report anonymously, please indicate this in your message, leave your email or phone number, and do not leave your name. Someone from the office will contact you within 24 hours to set up a meeting with an investigator. As noted on the website, Brattleboro lawyer Amy Goddard, a partner Annis and Goddard PLC, is committed to providing transparent, accessible, and safe avenues for reporting. For those requiring accommodation, the firm will make every reasonable effort to support your needs. For more information, call the law firm at 802-451-0905 or email report@wsesd.info. That's the draft that I believe that has also been provided to the superintendent's office for to be posted. Sure. Okay. Mindy?
Hi, thank you for considering those suggestions. And also, I did notice you added the phone number and the email address at the end, but I was going to say that if you put the phone number maybe further up, toward earlier in the messaging, it might make it feel more accessible to anybody who might not have internet access. Because the first reference just says to go to the website. So if you include the phone number, it just might make it seem more accessible. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Hi, my name is Sherry Keefe. I'm a former student. Just wondering if this information has been sent out to current parents and students. I think it would be important to include them in this investigation if they have any pertinent information.
This is a draft press release, so I imagine it would go to Vermont Digger and the Brattleboro Reformer and any other sources like that, but we can certainly look at other sources where it could be distributed.
I just think it would be important for that to happen and have it be a direct communication from the superintendent's office. I think that would show an enormous amount of support for the investigation.
No, I mean, it's a press release. It will go out to the community. We can follow up with follow-up communication.
I did have one, I read this through and I wondered why it was included in the formerly Brattleboro Junior High, because I'm not sure that that was even an entity ever.
It was when I was there, so.
And it was in this building?
It was over there, where BAM's.
But I kind of wondered about it because it was always been Brattleboro Union High School, which means that Vernon students came here, and to say that it was Brattleboro Junior High is a bit of a misnomer.
Well, I don't know if maybe there's a better way to indicate that it may have been known as, may have been, maybe some people knew it as the junior high.
I asked Barb, she was going to look into it, but she got back to me today and she said she was going to do some more research, but I'd be more comfortable if that wasn't there at all.
Okay. Deborah.
I'm not sure that I'm concerned about overkill in terms of all the possible names of the given school to accommodate the multiple generations of people in the community. I did not hear, only because it was almost a sidebar conversation, the response to Sherry Keefe's request that this be a direct communication from the superintendent to current parents or guardians. I'm sorry, can you just say it a little louder?
Say what I believe, and then Mark can address it if he feels it. It's a press release, so it will go out to different locations, and if it needs to come through the superintendent to different areas, then I guess I would leave that to Mark to determine when the press release is released out, that it seems like it might be appropriate for him to, however else he might provide other messages, if maybe that would go out in that avenue that way. So, yes.
And a clarification on the term harassment in that statement. Those of us who work in school, harassment, by definition, there's 9 protected categories. We investigate it all the time. There's harassment based on religion, based on national origin, all kinds of different protected categories. So I don't know if you're trying to dig at sexual harassment, and specifically, we investigate in a middle school, we investigate sexual harassment student to student fairly frequently. Whether they're confirmed or not is another story, but I think that term can be used frequently. And there's varying kind of understandings of what it means from a legal context, school level.
I do just want to note again that because this is directed to past and present members of our communities, that it is really important that it does in fact go out to the school communities and not just in press releases to newspapers. Everyone has a different level of what they read. Not everyone reads Reformer or The Digger, but if your child is in school currently, you will be looking at whatever is coming out from the administration.
Well, I anticipate that once we send it out, that Mark will then, as he deems appropriate with whatever other
That's what
information
the committee talked about. That's what we agreed upon.
Okay.
That the board would send out a press release, and then we could follow up with follow-up communication. We are also at a sensitive time of the year where start of the school year documents are going home. So I don't want to send those things out at the same time, but I think having a press release be released far and wide is a great step. And we talked about, as school officials, we could then follow up after that. Right?
Yes. Michelle, did you have a question?
Well, I was wanting to clarify what I heard Sherry. I'm also now needing to clarify what I heard you say, because I wasn't aware of a committee. So I'm a little confused by that statement, but the way that I heard what Sherry was saying, because I know we've gotten some feedback about getting correspondence out to our school community without it coming from the administrator's office, because that could be a sensitive, topic to receive from potentially the institute at which you feel harmed, reaching out to you directly. And so I'm wondering, and maybe I didn't hear that correct, but I'm wondering if that's what she was saying is, can we distribute this directly? Find a way to distribute it where it's not coming with the attachment from your superintendent. And I believe I would anticipate Mark doing his own form of communication, wanting to. And Sherry could speak if I'm totally getting that wrong, but I feel like that's been consistent with sort of some feedback we've heard about finding ways to reach out to the community outside of the channels of getting a letter in your mailbox from the superintendent. So I don't know if a board message could somehow go out, or getting the piece of paper in that notebook with all the paperwork that comes home. So it's just present, like a copy of this press release. But that's kind of what I was hearing, a little bit different.
Mindy.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that my primary concern in requesting the naming of the schools is that prior to now, up until now at least, the tag on the investigation has been WSESD investigation. And the WSESD acronym didn't exist until how many years ago? It didn't exist when I was a student. So it was unfamiliar to me even last year when I started to jump in on these meetings. So my concern was that some former students, some alum might not know that WSESD encompasses their schools, their former schools. And also when I attended, BAMS did not exist. BAMS, that acronym didn't exist. It was Brattleboro Junior and Senior High School. So there absolutely was a junior high school that was just 7th and 8th grade. And frankly, some people have told me about abuses that occurred there. And then the high school was 9th to 12th grade, and people attended 6th grade at their elementary schools. So all of those acronyms, I mean, I think the difference between Brattleboro High School and Brattleboro Union High School would be less confusing to somebody, but just making sure that people know, if they attended Brattleboro Junior High School or any of the elementary schools. I think naming the schools really helps. And also I wanted to suggest, again, especially the phone number. I know most of the people that have that I've helped to connect with Attorney Goddard have called. So the more prominent you can make this, if it can be posted on your website, if it can be posted, on district websites, that would be helpful too, I think, just to make sure that it's reaching people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. Sherry?
Yes, my request still stands that I'd like something sent directly from the school, whether it be the superintendent or the school board, to current parents. I mean, many parents I've talked to feel like they're in the dark, that they don't really know a lot what's going on because they haven't had direct communication about it. I just think it would be helpful to open that door.
Thank you. This is the first step, and then it will be followed up on. So it sounds like maybe Ilana?
I just want to say, as we talk about Erin's Law and as we talk about the work that we're doing in our schools, it is incumbent upon us to look back and do the work and be really comfortable with talking about it, with normalizing it, with disseminating information. Otherwise, we cannot talk about what we're doing in this moment in time. It is irrelevant if we aren't going to do the work all the way through. So I know everyone is. Thank you. Just want to make that.
So I'm not sure if
We developed a plan.
the board would like to postpone this to the next meeting and have it. I mean, we really didn't have too much chance to read through it, or, I mean, does that seem like the board would entertain that? So if so, is there a motion to post?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe I'm out of time. I just wanted to speak about the process. Maybe it would be helpful to hear about the process. There was a committee there were people involved in this communication, and so the process was that, is it all right to share that?
Sure.
Okay, I think that it would be helpful. Maybe that will help clear this up. There were several board members who were going to get this information, which you have done, and created a press release. And then Mark and several administrators were also present. And then we are going to work as an admin team at our retreat next week to do some of this work, and then come back together with that small committee to review the work that we were able to do. From there, take that communication that the board members were able to create in conjunction with the attorney. And once that got put out from the board, then it would be available for the school, for the superintendent and the schools to put out. So we're kind of working in parallel right now, because there is a lot of work to get done before the start of school. But I think it's important for everybody to know that this work is being done, and that there are members of the board who are putting together this communication, and that once that was done and everybody agreed on it, we would take it and be able to pass that out. Similarly, we would be doing the work that we as administrators can do to share that out. Once our retreat has happened, we haven't had a chance to be together yet. So that was the plan that we've talked about. We've met like 2 times about that. So
For example, the action steps that I outlined after Kate presented Erin's Law. Those are the steps that we're going to engage in collectively as an admin team.
Kelly?
Yes.
So if we delayed release of this press conference, wouldn't that delay things at the administrative summit?
no. We're still doing the work. Sorry, I'm speaking for you, but we're still doing the work that we can do monthly, daily in our schools. That's the work that we're planning to do at that retreat. So they are 2 kind of separate things happening, and we will be able to share the work that we do, just as Kelly has shared the work that she has been able to put together in terms of this communication.
But the immediate release of this press announcement, press release wouldn't interfere with anything that you're doing either.
No.
So my wish is for it to be accepted with as you read it, Kelly, and release it as soon as possible.
Well, I can say that if what I believe may happen is we get some report from the investigator, we may have a meeting next week on that. And maybe we could put this on there to address it. I guess it's, we are a couple 4 board members are a little more familiar with this. And for the rest of the board members who may not have had the opportunity and really should have the opportunity to weigh in on, I guess I'm mindful of that as well.
So then I appreciate what you're saying, and I move that we hold this to the next meeting. It's now been read into public record, which means it can be an addendum to the agenda.
Believe that Barb, it's already been provided to Barb in.
I'm not sure that this version is the one that is it has been. Okay. So it seems to me that so that everyone can weigh in on it at the next meeting, reading it carefully. So I move that we hold this over to the next meeting
So
for approval.
It sounds like you want to postpone it till the next.
Well, what I'm hearing is we're going to hear, hopefully, something definitive in terms of the investigation, we're hoping. And it seems to me it would make sense to hold this
I
over.
just want to make sure that we're making the right procedural motion is made.
The motion would be to table the subject until our next meeting.
I'll second that.
So I make a motion to table this until our next meeting.
Thank you, Deborah, and
Yes.
thank you, Michelle, for second.
And I just, I support tabling it because I feel a little bit in the dark right now. I'm not aware of board committee and I'm not sure what the
It's
correlation
not a
is.
full board committee. It was just 4 board members.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of a selection of board members that were communicating with Mark on behalf of the board. And so we haven't been updated on what's going on, but I'm not clear on what the correlation is between this draft and apparently something with Mark, because I support the draft and I think that would be wise to get out as soon as possible. It looks fine. It seems like something we should have in motion. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, does this draft, in my mind, these are 2 issues, but are they related? So it does need to be tabled because they're related, or can we pass the draft and is there something I'm missing here? Because
Pass the draft, then it goes out as a press release. So the question is are sufficient number of board members happy with the draft as I read it? Or do you and the other board members want to take the time to review it and thoughtfully and come back at our next meeting, which could be next week if we get a report from the investigator?
Is this draft in conjunction with working collaboratively with the superintendent's office?
This is our draft. Mark would be working on something coming from the administration.
They're unrelated.
Well, they're somewhat related, but they're not. I mean, his draft isn't based on what we've written. It's, he may take some of the wording, I'm not sure, but he will have his own.
We're focusing on action steps that I talked about after Kate's presentation as an admin team. And we will piggyback on the board communication.
It's related in the sense that it's the same subject, right? But it's coming from two different angles, very necessary angles. So I think that's what you're hearing. It's related. It's the same subject.
Okay. Okay, I very much support the press release, and I think it's great. And I do feel a sense of urgency to see it move forward. If it was correlated to like a strategic plan with the superintendent's office that we haven't been updated on, then I would say we have to table this until we're all updated.
This is why it was brought this evening. This has not really been in existence a long time. We just met, the second time we met was yesterday. So this is hot off the press. So it sounds, yes.
Chair?
Yes.
I have a clarifying question for the motion.
Sure.
When Ms. Stanford referred to tabling this, does that mean the press release?
The draft press release. Yeah. Glad I'm not alone here.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, Liz?
Well, I have that same sense of urgency. I think we should take Mindy's comments about where to put the phone number and really look at that and look at where to put it in, because Mindy's a reporter. She knows how people read these things. And she's given us valuable suggestions before. And I think we should, take a few days at least to look at where else we can put that phone number in the release to make it really obvious to the public.
Thank you, Liz. I have taken some notes, and that is one of the things that I have written down. So all those in favor of tabling the draft press release until our next board meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Okay, great. So we have tabled that. We are going to move along as quickly as possible to.
You're like.
Can I make a motion to extend the meeting?
Yes, please.
By 10 minutes.
Okay. Is there a second to extending it for 10 minutes?
Second.
Actually, we've done the admin report.
Okay.
It's going to be very.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Anne, for a second. All those in favor of extending the meeting for 10 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, thank you. So now we are moving on to the admin report.
Okay, I'm just going to be very brief. We reported out quite a bit tonight. I can report out a more detailed report at the SU meeting tomorrow, but we do have some business. So I move that the Windham Southeast School District Board decline to purchase the property at 850 Western Ave, Brattleboro, contingent on the right of first purchase in the July 15th, 1955 deed continuing forward. So the background. Back in 1955, when Academy School was built, a property next to the school property was essentially promised to the school district to have the first right of purchase. Since 1955, the house has been sold a number of times, and at each occasion, we have chosen not to put in an offer to purchase the property. And that's the recommendation for myself and Frank tonight.
So I'm being told procedurally you can't actually make the motion, but thank you for setting that up. I'll make the motion as Mark presented. Is there a second?
Could you Oh, I'd like to request that Mr. Spino get me the wording on that via email, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Mark.
just clarify, did you say that we are not buying a house that's for sale? Okay.
But in the event that it becomes for sale again, it will still have the option.
We've got our own houses for sale.
Is there a second?
Ever think the only people
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
who know
Okay,
about other papers, and after I've already
joking?
reported the phone number.
I second that motion.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Michelle?
Yeah, what you're saying.
Kaya, did you have a,
The person who was just talking had tried to talk earlier. I don't know if anybody saw that. They unmuted for a second.
I did not, but we will make sure to allow her an opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Raise your hand.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, who made the motion that Mr. Spino read and then who seconded it?
I made the motion and Michelle seconded.
Thank you.
Okay, so is there any discussion on this topic right here? Any board members have any comments, questions? Okay, anyone online have a comment, question? Okay, so all those in favor of approving the motion as presented by Mark, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Did you?
No more for.
One-year position.
Oh, that's right.
Come on.
That's super exciting news. Mary Kaufman is going to be having a baby in October, so a maternity leave coming up very soon. We are asking for the flexibility to post a one-year assistant principal position to work in collaboration with Mary to start the school year, hopefully. And then to finish the year with Mary when she returns from her maternity leave. And we're requesting this as an option in terms of who we get for candidates and how we balance that with what is this, student engagement coordinator?
Yeah, I have two positions that haven't been completely filled yet that are, kind of those support positions that work with families and also around behavior. So they're pretty major positions. We have a part-time UCBA, but our family engagement position has yet to be filled.
A temporary one-year position that we may or may not fill, but we would like the flexibility for problem-solving purposes as we get very close to the school year.
And also there would be no administrator for several months, so they could fill that role as well.
I can run over.
You can do it. You can
Move that this board establish a one-year assistant principal position at Oak Grove School.
Okay, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of establishing a one-year position for an assistant principal at Oak Grove School, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
very much, Mark. So Frank, did you have anything? Thank you. Frank, you had something for the fiscal report?
I can recap our finance committee very briefly. So we met at 5 o'clock, went over a preliminary fiscal year end. And the sort of the recap of that meeting was we're ending in a very favorable financial position. We are ahead of the budget plan. And we are in the process of closing up the fiscal year and preparing for all of the reporting deadlines that most of them fall on August 15th. We have our CPA audit scheduled and everything is on course to wrap up in a very good fiscal position, put us in good shape for fiscal year 24 as we start planning that in just a few weeks.
Okay. Were you going to address the Whetstone Village?
Whetstone Village, this is a quick update. There have been no offers to purchase or accept as a donation the three lots that were purchased in the early 2000s by the Career Center as part of the construction trades educational opportunity. The issue is that the lots are not really conducive to building, even though that is what the original intent was. So the district has been paying $1,000 a year in association fees, and we've been trying to transfer ownership to another entity. Haven't been successful, but there does appear to be potentially new interest that we're exploring.
Okay, thank you.
See if the house next to Academy wants to make a trade and like. Okay.
Thank you very much. So then we're going to very quickly go into the new business. Deborah, did you want to?
This is going to be a series of policies for first reading in accordance with the Policy and Amendment Committee's responsibility to review and possibly revise and edit all policies. The next 10 days are a warning period, enabling the community to assess and review the following policies. And they are D9, alcohol and drug-free workplace, D10, resignations, D12, policy on prevention of harassment of employees, F22, student assessment, and F30, pupil privacy rights. Again, it's a first reading. If anyone has any concerns or objections, please get in touch with the committee members. They are Deborah Stanford, Tim Maciel, David Scholes, Liz Adams, Sean Murphy, and of course you can email any board member and they will communicate with us. I believe in the last set of minutes, Wendy Levy clearly indicated all of the edit marks on these documents. But again, just to say it for the record, strikeouts are VSBA deletions, and the policy committee has accepted those strikeouts. Bold indicates VSBA edits, which again, this committee has accepted. Highlighted in blue indicates a decision by the Policy and Amendment Committee to retain the original wording, rejecting what the VSBA says is unnecessary. And highlighted in red indicates policy and amendment additions, specific wording from this committee. So those are the policies for first reading. We are at a 10-day warning period, and it will come up again at the next full board meeting for approval for adoption, readoption, assuming there are no objections. Thank you.
A clarifying question about one of the changes. Yeah, I mean, anticipating you have an answer. For the alcohol and drug-free workplace, D9 policy, the no employee, volunteer, et cetera, will distribute, dispense, possess, or use alcohol or any drug on or in the workplace. And then it continues to say, nor will they be under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And the word illegal was crossed out, and it goes on and defines drugs. And includes amphetamines, barbiturates, marijuana, or any other controlled substance. And so if you see where I'm going, amphetamines are used to treat neurodivergent disorders, barbiturates, seizures, and benzodiazepines are controlled substances. So we actually
pursued this with Pietro Lynn. This became a question, and he encouraged us to accept the VSBA edit of removing illegal, because for him, as he says, it's not a question of whether the drug is legal or illegal, whether it's over the counter or not. Rather, it's an issue of whether the employee is impaired by the use of that substance. So he says, I think the gist of the policy is to address any employee who is under the influence of substances. Whether the substance is legal or illegal is not really the issue. We do not want impaired employees at work. They are a danger to themselves and others, particularly in a school setting. I think that's the focus of the policy. Because I raised the issue about over-the-counter medications, I raised the issue also about medications that might be considered controlled, but are prescribed for a given individual that become illegal if you then share it or dispense it with others. So he wants to stay away from that in terms of the wording of this policy, because it's not the drug itself, it's whether you're impaired by the drug. So that's the essence of this. We went into this in great detail with him. We also went into the issue of cannabis soon becoming legalized, and we backstroked from that very quickly, as per Pietro Litt. So that's the best I can do. That's the best I can do with this, because I also had concerns about this policy.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I know. It's just the way it reads to me. If I were an employee that utilized some of these controlled meds and I had a prescription, I would feel like, I guess I'd have a little bit of concern, like what if my, you have HIPAA, you should be protected. So you shouldn't have to report that you're using this and get permission. But I struggle with that part.
I think the language in that first paragraph is while under the influence and implying impaired.
I think of under the influence, it's like, if you see a person with ADHD, they are under the influence when they are medicated and thriving. So I guess I'm wondering if
I'm gonna suggest that.
We don't have
things
time.
then perhaps,
do you want to communicate with me by email on this?
Appreciate it, the
Okay, so
conversation.
I mean, it might be more efficient to do it that way, and then you might be able to iron out what
I had no doubt you guys did your homework. That's why I was asking.
no, but this is what the 10-day warning period is all about. So please send me an email. Thank you.
we are going, so you've done everything you need to on that? Okay,
I'm
great.
done.
So we're going to move on to the last item before we have 3 executive sessions. 2 of them should be very quick. One of them might be a little longer. So Leadership Council Summit with principals and Leadership Council chairs. This was something that I believe last year was talked about, having a summit of all the leadership councils to see if they could together better or whatnot, maybe communication, or see how they're doing things. I didn't really anticipate that there would be much necessarily done with that this evening. I just kind of wanted to put it on people's radars. That way, if you had any thoughts or whatnot, you can, or thoughts to formulate, you can come back maybe at the next board meeting with some.
This came up at a policy meeting. We were talking about leadership councils, and it's certainly one of the next policies that we're looking at. And the next policy meeting is
22nd.
when?
22nd.
The 22nd.
It's the night before our next regular board meeting.
Yeah, so I don't know that we're going to have much to report on the next day.
The
It's
policy
not,
is separate from the.
right, it's not something that has to be decided. It's just that I wanted to make sure the topic came back up so that it didn't get lost. Michelle?
So I just want to share, this was originally an idea, a concept that Andy Skarzinski had presented to the board. And the Communication Council actually spent a significant amount of time working on outlining and creating recommendations. And Andy left. And so because leadership councils are a policy, it is the superintendent's responsibility to implement such. So I don't know if if this is something that interests him and if he'd like to have the work that the communication council did, or for us to come back and, to share it with the board or something. I don't know what Mark wants to do because this is his territory. I just wanted to let everyone know that this is something that we had spent considerable amount of time working collaboratively with the superintendent on this very topic.
Michelle, so maybe it can be a more fuller discussion next time. And,
Sure.
Okay. Who does?
Jamie.
Okay. Jamie?
Hi, Jamie Coultois Putney. I just wanted to say, as it's written in the agenda, it says chairs of the leadership councils. And I know many of us who've served on leadership councils for a number of years have been looking forward to participating in the summit. So I wanted to request that it's expanded out to any member of the leadership council.
That I extend my apologies for that when I sent I added an additional word. Sorry about that. So of course we would I think the intent would be to include as many people as Thank you, Jamie. So I'm going to make a motion that we go into executive session based on after making a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage. I make a motion that the board goes into executive session. Is there a second?
What is the topic?
The topic is academic records or suspension or discipline of students. So is there a second? Thank you, Tim. All those in favor of going into executive session, and actually I'm going to amend the motion to invite Mark in. Of course. All those in favor of going into executive session under 1 VSA. No. All those in favor of going into executive session, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, so then I make a motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A7 academic records or suspension or discipline of students. I make a motion to go into executive session, and is there a second? Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of going into executive session under the 313A7, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we are in executive session at 9:04. So we are back at 9:18. Thank you for your patience, everyone. And so did you want to make a motion on the mark?
Yes, I move that this board uphold the decision of administration regarding the student matter.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Michelle. All those in favor of approving Mark's recommendation, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And did you
Was the second
on the contracts?
The student enrollment.
I move that this board authorize the chair to sign a contract with, I don't remember, Brattleboro Restorative Justice to complete a training in restorative justice with that company.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deborah. All those in favor of allowing me to sign a contract
for restorative justice training, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So now the last thing is another executive session. I don't believe we're going to have any action taken at the end. So I don't think we'll need to have more reported. But so I will make the motion to go into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1A contracts and regarding training for the SD board.
We need to make a finding first of what's based on contract.
So then if that is after making a specific finding that a premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage, then
what is the finding? Like, what is the finding?
This is contracts on the board training.
On the restorative practice training?
No.
Then this is.
Michelle, you're out of order. I'm board
Not out
chair.
of point of order. This one right here is what we can talk about.
Okay, so then,
Thank you.
then it wasn't really on.
Well,
That was not the
based on,
basis of
based
it.
on that is a
Can we do
different
two?
board.
We do two under two statutes.
We can't.
Do I go under executive session under two statutes?
We cannot discuss
At the
SU
same,
contracts.
Excuse me, I'm not talking about SU.
at the same time, you really
Yes.
only need one thing, like it wouldn't have to be a student matter and a contract matter. It could just be one section of open meeting law of the one
Contract.
VSA
It is under
313.
contracts. That's what it is warned as and what we're going under executive session under. So all those in favor of, is there a second to go? No, we already did that. All those in
What
favor
is
of
the
going under.
finding, please? What is the finding that puts a party at disadvantage to be able to go in under?
If you would like to challenge me, Michelle.
I'm not challenging, I'm asking for clarifying information that is public knowledge.
I'm telling you that this is on contracts regarding training for the SD board.
What is
That's
the
it.
disadvantage? That is that statement.
And that,
Michelle, stop.
21.
that's part of the problem. If we just,
Order. Points of order.
Session at 9:21. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Order.
Thank you, everyone.